Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes, you are. Okay, that's probably just on my end then. Yeah, I can hear you.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much for the call.
No worries. All right, so do you just want to give a brief introduction of yourself and what you want to talk about? We'll jump right into it.
So I just go by the name Blue Man. All right. You can call me Blue Man, and the reason why I'm here is because I wanted to talk about the fact that the reason why Black people are in the they are in today is because of their culture. That's the issue. That's something that must be addressed.
All right, that sounds like a good start. Just one question before we start off. Is there any reason why the color it's the blue color that's in your name, or is that just a random color that you picked?
Just a random color that I picked.
All right, fair enough. Um, yeah, sure. So I guess I can actually. Do you want to like have an opening statement where you elaborate a bit on just what you mean, just so you can put up your position immediately, so that I don't assume like what your position is in my opening statement?
Basically, what I mean, what I'm basically talking about is that they are, for some reason, practicing a habit of making poor decisions. Okay,
Hmm.
whether it's getting pregnant when they're way too young, getting pregnant when they don't have money, choosing a life of crime, not working hard enough, lack of self accountability. Those are the things that I'm talking about.
Hmm. Okay, perfect. Yeah. So then I guess the initial question we can ask here is hold on, let me just write down what you've said here, just so I can keep it in mind. Um, So, where do you think this culture comes from? Because typically, there are two places where human behavior can arise from. At least that's what tends to be agreed upon right now in most of academia. It can either arise from your environment and the conditions around you, and the sort of conditions you're placed under, and the coercions and the pressures, and the motivations that your environment gives to you in order to engage in different sorts of activities, or there is certain genetic or biological traits about an individual that makes them engage in certain behaviors. Um, which one of these two do you think contributes to Black culture being the way it is right now?
I would say it's the attitude.
It's okay. Where does the attitude come from,
The attitude, it basically comes from someone's motivation
and where does that motivation come from?
within.
Okay, so what do you think motivates somebody to, for example, make poor financial decisions or to engage in criminal behavior?
Just being young and dumb. Just
Just
being
being
young, being dumb, being naive.
Okay, perfect. But we do know that there are young and naive people of all races. So how is it that it's
That is
mostly
true.
black individuals that have these issues with crime rates and stuff like that?
With what? Issues
So
with what?
why is it that it's there's a disproportionate amount of black people who have issues with criminal activity amongst their youth?
It's just, when you have like these habits that continue to trickle down throughout the years, that's what happens.
So where do
Okay,
these
it's
habits
just that
originate from?
they, you know what? It just, I'm not able to say where it originated from,
Hmm.
but we can be able to track where it came from. Because if you go back to the 1960s, that's when we started to see serious issues. Okay, have you ever heard of President Lyndon B. Johnson?
Yep.
He basically had an advisor of his, some Patrick Moynihan, who basically created a Moynihan report. And he saw when he looked at, families within the black communities in the ghettos,
Hmm.
he noticed that many of these black families are being led by single mothers. He realized that the father was at home.
Hmm. Okay, so I guess we can start with so you kind of you're unsure about exactly where this sort of inclination, where these motivations come from, and why they seem to be specific to Black people in America. You seem to just say, "Oh, it trickles down," but you can't really say exactly where it originates from. Here's where I guess I can come in because I believe I do at least have a fairly good understanding of why these behaviors tend to arise. So When you live in a society in which you've had a group of people which for centuries have been given worse and unfair circumstances and unjust and unequal access to important services and goods that increase your likelihood of doing well in life, when you have systems such as a criminal justice system which is biased in many ways against you, when you have labor markets that are biased against you, when you live in disproportionately poor areas with poor housing conditions, with lead poisoning in the materials that you interact with on a day-to-day basis, that all culminates into leading you to having a higher probability of, first of all, maybe developing some conditions as a result of your environment directly, such as lead poisoning, but also just generally being of a poor socioeconomic condition through no fault of your own, just because you are born to a black family and black families are overrepresented in living in, low income areas and low income housing and stuff like that. And we do know, as per academic consensus, that having a poor socioeconomic condition uh, tends to increase your crime rate, for example, because when you're in a position where you have less opportunities available to you, but you still need to make ends meet, you're more likely to turn to criminal behavior as a means by which to fill this gap. Or sometimes not even to do that, but sometimes just like a lack of education that comes, with that. Education is one of the best predictors you can possibly have for crime. And if you're giving poor quality of education, you're going to be more likely to engage in crime. And Black Americans are disproportionately given poor access to education, among other things. So, as a result of having all these sort of societal factors biased against them, that's why this sort of black culture, as we call it, whatever that means, has developed. It's as a result of the environment that Black Americans live in, rather than coming from some place within or trickling jump through generations or whatever you're trying to imply.
I'll have to I'll have to say no there. No, no, no. I'll have
Okay.
to completely disagree with you.
All right.
And the reason being is because when you look throughout the decade, 30s, 40s, 50s, black people were poor, but then yet they weren't committing as much crime. There were more two-parent families, two-parent households. I mean, those more black families were more intact, but as soon as after the civil rights era, for some reason, black people were doing a lot worse when they could have done better. Here's the issue here. Black people are just not working hard enough. That's the issue.
Okay. So we can go over a few things here that you mentioned. So, number one, a lot of the crime statistics pre that time, you will have a very hard time finding super reliable crime statistic previous to that point in time, previous to the 1960s. However, a lot of it has to do with the fact that there were completely like it is practically impossible to compare crime rates between right now in this contemporary era, both because the conditions are completely different, just general material conditions. The rights afforded to Black and white Americans are completely different today. The statistical techniques that we use to record and document crime rates are completely different today. There are a bunch of things that make sort of comparing pre Civil War crime rates to post Civil War crime rates very, 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 very sketchy. Now, you said that that the main reason was that they don't want to work harder. So I'm gonna return you the question again. So why is this? Is this because they live in an environment which produces a culture of not working as hard, whatever that means, assuming that that's the case, or is there some like fundamental genetic biological thing that just make black people lazier? Because there has to be one of those two, right? There's no third option available here. There's
No,
no
just
sort of
their
like
attitude,
divine
their
being.
their attitude in life.
And
Their
where does the attitude
attitude in
come
life.
from?
The attitude, it comes from within. Okay,
What do you mean by come from
because
within? I'm
here's
really
the
curious.
problem. From in their mindset, basically. Their
And
mindset. And then on top of that, when they're born with people that don't have good mindsets,
mhm.
then the parents that don't want to take care of their kids, and then the kids don't care, and then they join gangs. That's what's happening. Because here's the thing with the war on drugs.
Mhm.
Richard Nixon, he might have put drugs in black communities, but who chose to do the drugs?
And who chose to
Black
what?
people. Who chose to do and sell the drugs? Black people.
Okay, so there are a
So
few pretty interesting things here. So once again, I could just go further on. Okay, so where there's, okay, their mindset comes from their parents' mindset, where does their parents' mindset come from? And you cannot answer that question. You fundamentally can't. The only way you can answer that question is by saying either environmental or by saying genetic. I could also post a series of hypotheticals where I say that, okay, so let's say, you take a child from a family which has a history of, generations that have a poor mindset, and put them in, in the what's it called, in a different household, in a different socioeconomic condition, they will probably tend to do better. So is it really like a genetic thing that comes with like parentry and stuff like that, mindset thing? No, it seems to be more part of the condition. But I can just fundamentally keep going that, and you won't have an answer for that, because you've just defaulted to like mindset, oh, previous generation mindset, oh, but you can't dedicate to saying, okay, it's genetic or it's environmental, which is what it has to come down to. There's no third factor there. But in terms of
I
some of the
mean,
things you said in gangs, hold on,
the
I need to get I
young
need to respond to
kids.
this before, because you laid out these points and I don't want to leave it unanswered for. So you said that it's Black Americans' fault that they start to engage in drug trades, and you even conceded that the U.S. government planted drugs in a lot of these Black communities. So when you are in a situation in which you are economically and socioeconomically and socially in an extremely bad position, where it is very difficult to make ends meet, there are just a bunch of dead end jobs around, it's hard to get employed, there's a high crime rate in your community, why are we, to blame those people for engaging in one of the few ways they have to make a living for themselves and for their families? Doesn't it seem to make more sense to instead direct the
They did
critique
have other
towards
ways.
what other ways does it have? What do they have then? If you
They
live
did
in a
have other
ghetto, you have
ways.
poor education
Here's what
available.
he
You may not have your parents there. There's like shitty infrastructure. The healthcare is garbage as well. You might have lead poisoning. There's so many things here that strip away a lot of the opportunities. It's not a hard line thing where you can say, oh, they could have done X, Y, and Z. It's a game of probability, right? Fundamentally, this is how sociological understanding works. And when you're put in these positions, and there is one clear way to make a lot of money and to provide for yourself, why are we to blame them for picking that one path rather than blaming the system and the environment which promotes them and encourages them to take that path in life?
No, no, no. Here's the issue. Okay. They did have the opportunities. Even if, a school's underfunded, does you can still graduate and do well in a school that's underfunded. It's not hard. Here's the thing. Redlining was made illegal in 1968. So this is what they should have done. Worked hard, graduated from school, and work, maybe one or two jobs if you're poor to save up money to go to college and then graduate. Very simple. Very simple.
Okay,
But
I'm gonna
instead,
ask you. I'm gonna say,
many of them chose to have parents have that. Many of them chose to have kids out of wedlock and become single moms. That's the problem.
okay, so there are a bunch of things here that you mentioned. You mentioned redlining. You seem to be kind of like just grasping at straws here before you talk about gangs. And we're just throwing out redlining. While a lot of the sort of like legal framework necessary to put in place redlining policies have, like you said, been outlawed in the bill you mentioned, a lot of the effects from previous redlining is still in effect today. Some people still use redline city plans today in their city planning. It is generally agreed upon in the scientific community that despite redlining being made illegal, a lot of its effects are still being faced today in a pretty much identical way to if they haven't been made illegal at all. You need to have like proactive ways to
Like
address
what?
redlining in the past instead of just making it illegal. Now, I need to talk about the second point as well, because if you lay out multiple points, I need to respond to multiple points. So when you talk about education thing, it's, yeah, I understand it's super easy for you or for me to just say, oh, Lamau, they should have just gone to school and not done any crime. But if you live in, if we have two different situations, let's say you have a situation where you have a white kid who grows up in an upper middle class family who has support from their parents when it comes to their educational career. They have good teachers who are passionate about their learning and that help them with assignments. They can have parents who can afford tutors for them in case they're falling behind. They have a bunch of extracurriculars and they have a bunch of resources in school that they can apply towards the students to increase their likelihood and to increase their ability to learn most effectively. Compared to a society, or compared to a kid who lives in low income housing in a society with a high crime rate, where their parents may not be home or may be working, may be needing to work a bunch of jobs all the time just to provide the bare minimum essentials they need to live, where the school is underfunded, the classrooms are overcrowded, there aren't any resources available for you. In which of these two situations do you think that people have a higher probability of going through the entire academic process and graduating successfully?
You can still do well even in a poor environment.
You can, but
You
what's the
can still
probability?
you it's still pretty decent.
So if you have
You
100
can put the
people
work for it.
in situation, the first situation, and 100 people in the second situation, in which of these two are you most likely? And these are like identical people. Like we have two different realities here. If we place 100 identical people in the first, 100 identical people in the second one, who is most likely to succeed? And in which of these two situations is the most amount of people most likely to succeed?
It doesn't matter.
Why doesn't it matter?
You can still do well in the poor area.
It's
You can
possible,
still
but
do
it's
well.
way
It's just the
harder.
mindset.
But it's way
Yeah,
harder, right?
that's
So if we
true.
have it, if we have two different situations, so you can see that it's harder in one or the other. So when you have two different parts of the population who disproportionately face either the first or the second situation that I laid forth to you, why are you then surprised? And why do you blame the individuals then for the outcome of having less graduates rather than talking about the system which either increases or decreases their chances of graduating successfully?
Because they're not working hard enough. That's why. It's
So,
not
but
that
then I ask you
challenging
again,
of where you can't
So
make it.
if you have 100 people that are, you have two different realities and you have like 100, like, I don't know, like ethereal beings, okay? Which have like the same character and everything. And you just like duplicate these two people and you put them in two different schools. And the ones that I laid forth to you. So despite both of the kids in both schools having an equal like will to work and will to succeed, do you believe that there will still be a discrepancy and a difference in the amount of people that graduate in the two different scenarios?
No, there shouldn't be.
So you say that as long as the character of these two people are the same, it doesn't matter what the circumstances are. They have an exact.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So I would need a massive citation on this because it is academic consensus that the better you improve academic situations and the better you fund the schools and the better the teachers are and the better the classrooms are, the better the environment is, the better the performance of the students are. If this was the case, if what you said was true, that it doesn't matter at all what the environmental conditions were, why do we spend any money on school whatsoever? Why don't we just have shitty underfunded schools everywhere? And we can just save a bunch of money there, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how good the schools are, right? As long as you have the individual effort and the individual mindset to succeed. So why should we spend money funding schools whatsoever?
It's all about the individual. That's the problem. The kids, right? And that's the problem that I see within Black communities. Like they're complaining.
Wait, I need you to answer my
They're
question though.
complaining.
Why, if what you said is true, if the environmental conditions don't matter and it's just personal mindset, why should we fund schools? Like above just basic subsistence?
Just to make the experience better.
And why
It
do we want
makes
to
the
make the experience
experience
better?
better.
Why do we want to make the experience better?
So kids, can have it easier for them.
Okay, perfect. So you're
They can have
saying, so you're illustrating then that depending on the quality of the schools, it may be easier or harder to succeed in your academic career.
yes, it can make it easier, but even if it's
Okay,
harder, you can
so
still
then
make it. That's my point.
so then you've completely backed off the point of saying that the environmental conditions don't matter, because clearly you've shown right now that depending on the funding, it can be easier or harder to graduate from school. So then, given that,
But you can
why
still
shouldn't we
make
try
it
to
though, even if
equalize?
it's harder.
Sorry?
But even if it's harder, you can still make it though. No
You can
excuse.
still, but like you said, it's way harder. And because something is harder, you will have less people successfully completing the task than if it was easier. That's what harder and easier means. So as a result of only the environmental conditions of only the quality of schools, you see a difference in outcome between two different populations. So then it seems to me more likely, or at least an easier way to address this, would be to alleviate the discrepancies in environmental conditions between population 1 white people and population 2 black people. And when we equalize these environments as good as possible, we're more likely to see a more egalitarian outcome when it comes to people's performance in things like school.
No, but here's the thing, though. Here's the thing.
I'm waiting. I'm ready.
If you actually look within crime statistics, poor Latino communities actually have smaller rates of violent crime compared to poor black communities. So it's not just a poverty thing; it's a culture problem.
Okay, so we're backing off the school thing. We're talking about something different now. It's fine if you want to talk about something different, but I just want us to acknowledge that we have done so at least. So what are the differences in environmental conditions between poor Latinos and African Americans? Well, there are a bunch of differences here. These two situations are maybe comparable in some degrees in that they're both minority groups, but are different in very, 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 very many other ways. So we have one society, we have the black population, in which these people's ancestors were literally brought over here on slave ships and worked as slaves for hundreds of years, and then lived as second-class citizens for a bunch of more years, and then, had that be made illegal. Not like, we still have people alive today that went to segregated schools. And then not having those sort of like discrepancies, these generational wealth gaps being addressed through government action. And then on top of that, also having barriers today towards black people's success in the United States in terms of, for example, like employment and, other aspects and the criminal justice system and stuff like that, compared to a society in which, or like a group of people that immigrated here, with their family. They might go to, like jobs programs. They might have gone through, like the legal chambers of immigration, and therefore receive some government assistance when it comes to just like starting up within this new country, where they have more of a choice in where in America they want to settle and what opportunities they want afforded to them. Like these two situations are not comparable in very, very, very many ways. So I don't see what
actually no, they
what
are a
this argument is.
comparison actually, because you got poor.
I mean, it's a
people
comparison,
coming
but
to
it's not a very good
America
one.
and they're flourishing. Because it is actually, because you think about poor people coming to America and then all of a sudden now they're flourishing. It really shows you how lazy blacks are being, how black people are being. They gotta work harder.
Okay, so I just laid forth a bunch of differences in the conditions of immigrants and black Americans, but you seem to just want to hand wave that. So I ask you again then, why is there this difference in work ethic in between immigrants and black people? As you put it, why does this difference exist?
Lack of work ethic.
And where does this lack of work ethic come from?
Motivation, man. That's all it comes from.
And why do black Americans have less motivation than white Americans or that immigrants do, for example?
Because they're just like, forget it, man.
Because they're just forget it, man.
For some reason. Yeah.
That sounds like a fantastic argument.
And then when you raise a group of people that are just, and then, this culture of ignorance just passes on to, that's what you get.
So you still are completely unable to answer like the fundamental question here, which is, why do black Americans have a harder time engaging with the workforce or having motivations that a lot of other groups of people do? And you cannot answer this question. You are unable of doing it. You just keep like circling back to these vague, generational culture thing. It's their parents, but then like I don't know where their parents maybe got it from their parents. And no, I can't go this far back because then they were slaves. So I want to stop it somewhere in between, but it can't go for this doesn't make much sense to me. This just seems like rambling to me. So what I would propose to instead, and this is what generally is agreed upon among the scientific community, is that the very best predictor for engaging in criminal behavior is socioeconomic condition. It's the environment in which you're raised that will be the absolute number one best predictor as to your success in life. So we know for a fact
But many of
today.
these kids,
Mhm.
many of these kids, these black kids that are committing crimes, don't have a father in the home.
And why don't they have a father in the home?
Because the fathers are just callous men that just don't want to take care of the kids.
We're just going to get to the same part again. I'm just going
So
to keep
women
asking you
are
why,
just
and you're not going to be able to answer the question. So I'm going to go back to what I was trying to say before. What seems to be a much better reason to understand the differences in outcomes between two different population groups is by taking a look at their condition. And we know right now, today, that the criminal justice system is heavily biased against Black Americans. We know that policing is heavily
No,
biased
it isn't.
against. Oh, it's
It
not.
isn't.
Oh, it's. Do you want me to provide some resources on that? Because I have plenty to go over here, buddy. What if we talk about, for example, the fact that Black men who commit the same crime as white Americans, as white men, receive a sentence that's on average 20% longer?
There's
USSC
a reason to
17.
that. There's a reason to
And what's
that.
the reason to that?
Like, first of all, you have to ask, were these men able to afford good lawyers?
That's
Or
controlled for
if you're
understudy.
not able to, no, no,
They
it
talk
wasn't
about public law.
actually.
It's public lawyers.
Can you read that study for me right now?
I mean, it's like 50 pages. I don't know if
Or
you can
can
go
you
over
read
that.
where it says that?
Bruce Levin statistics for lawyers. Oh, they have a citation on the statistics for lawyers. I just have to go and look for this. Okay, while I look for that, I have a question for you. Why do they have worse lawyers on average?
Well, because they're poor.
And why are they poor?
Because they ain't working hard enough.
Do you know what generational wealth is? Generational wealth
Well,
disparities
if you
and stuff
work
like
hard
that?
enough, you can obtain generational wealth. So that's not an excuse.
Okay, so do you believe that the income, if your parents have like a high level of income, that you're also more likely to achieve a high level of income in your life?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay, well then you are just flat out wrong. Because every single like
It's all based on the mindset. Are
no,
you
it's
telling
not.
me?
It's definitely.
Are you
Do you believe
telling
that a
me that
person that
people
is
who
raised,
are
you agreed on this before? Why have we been arguing about this? Do you believe that somebody who is raised in low income housing without good access to education, healthcare, and other basic services, and who may not have that has parents that are poor that cannot afford extracurricular activities or tutorships or stuff like that, is going to have an equal opportunity, an equal chance, an equal easiness to achieve a successful academic career than somebody who's living in an upper middle class society in which
that
all these things are handed to them?
poor kid can still do it though.
You
That poor
can
kid can
still
still
do
go to
it,
college
but
though.
like you said before, it's harder for you, right?
Motivation. It's all about the motivation factor.
But
That's the
we agreed
motivation.
before, right, that even if motivation was equal across these two population groups, it would still be easier for one than the other, correct?
That is true.
Okay,
But it's
so
not so hard to the point where you can't do it. It's not so hard to the point that everybody won't be able to make it. No, everybody can still be able to make it, put effort.
it's possible, but it's very, very, very difficult. And because of that, because it is harder on average to do something, it means that more people will, on average, fail to do so. So, because of your parents' wealth and income, you're afforded a path in life that is easier than that of somebody whose parents had low income or who were less wealthy. So, because of this, your likelihood of also doing well in life is going to be higher if your parents also did well in life than if your parents did worse in life. Does this make sense to you?
Be, because how so?
What do you mean, because how so? I just explained to you why this is the case. Because it is easier on average for you to be successful in life if your parents were as well.
How is it? How?
Because you have an easier
How?
time in education because your educational programs are better funded and just work better. Your classrooms are better, your teachers are better, because of all these things, because you just generally have a better quality of life. It is easier for you to succeed.
And motivation is key as well. And that's
Motivation
what
is a part of it,
like
absolutely, but then
people are
motivation
lacking.
has to do with a bunch of other factors as well, which you still can't point to. But even if motivation is the exact same, it is still harder for you. And more people will still fail.
It's
I
all about the
don't know what.
motivation,
Okay, you
baby.
just keep repeating the same thing over and over
It's
again.
all
We're
about
not
it.
getting anywhere here.
But here's the thing: like, have you ever heard of a man by a conservative economist by the name of Thomas Sowell?
Yes, I have heard of Thomas Sowell.
I really recommend that you check him out.
I know who he is. He's part
I
of the
recommend that you
neoclassical.
check him out. He's
Yes. How is that a response to anything I've said, though? If you want to talk about economic
yes,
consensus,
because
you're like going full speed on the wrong lane of traffic, like against the academic consensus when it comes to generational wealth gaps right now. Because this is something that is just
no,
like
because he
this is
makes it
like
clear
worse
it's
than the
culture.
race realist debate I had when it comes from straying away from academic consensus. Like the statement that generational wealth doesn't exist as a concept, or that your parents' income or their wealth doesn't influence your chances to also attain a high level of wealth, that's like laughable. I don't even know if I can I can like process that, or just contend with that on average. And I agree. You're just gonna
No,
come back to
it's
say you're
all
just gonna say it's all about motivation again. But we already agreed that even if motivation was the same, you would still have disparate outcomes. So it doesn't matter. Motivation isn't relevant to this. And then if we were to talk about motivation, I were to talk about the fact that if you are in a bad situation socioeconomically, you're more likely to be less motivated. Then if you have everything spoon-fed to you and you have a community that supports you, you have a social group that supports you, you have friends that support you, you have a family that supports you, that are there for you, that can give you financial resources, that is also a massive difference in motivation. That is also an effect of socioeconomic condition and of your wealth and of your parents' wealth. So no matter where you go here, no matter if you keep drilling on the fact that generational wealth doesn't exist, or if you want to talk about motivation, you still cannot provide me a reason why these two things are disparate. Well, I can clearly point to different social conditions that lead to your motivation being what it is.
no. Here's one thing, but have you ever heard of Candace Owens? Because she made it very clear as well.
Oh yeah,
Self-accountability
Candace
is
Owens. She
very
was that lady,
important.
right? That got like that was subject to racial discrimination and then built a platform of saying that racism doesn't exist anymore.
No, she doesn't say that. She just says that it's not a big deal as it was back in the day.
You know that
And
she
she's right.
literally, like, the reason why she got famous was because she like drummed up a massive lawsuit because of racial discrimination she was facing at her school.
Okay. What does that have to do with what she's talking
No,
about?
I'm just talking about like the sort of like her intellectual integrity when it comes to representing social situations in an adequate manner. But yeah, keep going. What about Candace
Well,
Owens?
I mean, because here's the thing. She made it very clear that black culture is the problem. Okay? We're engaging in black people are engaging in way too much crime because there's not much home fathers in the home. Women are just making bad
Are you
choices,
coming back
picking
to
the
the
wrong
same
men.
thing
They
again?
don't
I'm trying
care.
to ask you to tell me why this is the case, and you cannot answer that question. You can't do
Because
it.
they don't have a motivation
And
in
why don't
life.
they have the
They're growing
motivation?
up environment because they're growing up in environments that don't have any motivation. For some reason, they
Okay,
didn't
so
have that hard
perfect,
spirit
perfect.
like they
I
did
agree with
back
you
then
100%.
in
They're
the day.
growing up in an environment which causes them to have less motivation. So when you are born, you do not get to pick which environment you are brought up in and where you want to live and with who you want to live. And we know that black people have, through the entirety of the history of the United States, been on average worse off than white Americans. So we know that black people who are born, who don't get to pick where they're born, are going to be more likely to be put into a worse environment than white people. And because they're more likely to be born into a worse environment, they're also more likely to have worse motivation, whatever you mean by that.
No, it's all about that motivation, man. It's all about it, especially when you have all these black people that are becoming millionaires and millionaires. I mean, come on, think about it.
If you want to
Look at all
compare
these
wealth
athletes and all these
between black and
successful
white
doctors.
Americans, I don't think they'll help your argument very much.
Well, here's what it's all about. It comes down to motivation, brother.
You've said that 17 million times, but you have been unable. Actually, you even
And I'll say it again.
that motivation has to do with your environment, and you should be able to agree that black Americans have access to a worse environment than white Americans do on average. So therefore, why are you surprised that black Americans have, on average, less motivation, whatever you mean by that, than white Americans?
So are you saying that?
Wait, I want you to answer my question.
The issue.
What did you say?
Repeat. I'm basically saying if we are you saying basically what we need to do is fix these environments?
That is exactly what I'm saying.
But hold on though. No, you don't. Even if you didn't fix these environments, they can. But to succeed, it's all about the motivation.
But we agreed that motivation comes from your environment. You said this just like a minute ago. So then why are you opposed to equalizing the environment?
Hold on. I know we can equalize that, no problem. But what I'm saying
well, then what
is
are we arguing about then? We agree then.
Be able to succeed. They should still be able to succeed if they didn't equalize the environment. Let me tell you something right now.
And some do succeed, but less than white Americans.
Redlining, hold on. When redlining was made illegal, how come black people, work hard until they're buy homes?
One more time. Can you say that one more time? How come?
Okay. When redlining was made illegal.
Yes.
In 1968.
Yes.
How come black people chose not to work hard until they're able to buy homes?
But we already agreed with this, right? We already agreed that it is harder for black Americans to get the amount of wealth necessary to be able to buy a home. We already agreed that it's harder for black Americans to do practically everything.
When they can work for it.
Yes, they can, but it's harder for them.
For it, though. How's it harder?
Okay, so I'm going to try to keep this explicitly to what we've talked about. So one of the main things that determine your ability to get employed is your education. And we agreed before that the differences in quality of your education has a direct influence in how easy it is for you to graduate and obtain a higher quality of education. We also agreed...
Education is not always key. Education is not always...
That's just one of the aspects, okay? That's just one of the very important aspects, okay? And I guarantee you that no matter which other aspect you pick, there is an effect on systemic, injustices there as well. But even if we talk to just about education, we already agreed that different quality of education leads to it being harder or easier for you to graduate, and we know that on average, white Americans have access to better quality of education than what black Americans do. So then, as an effect of it being easier for white Americans to obtain the qualifications...
Better job?
Sorry?
Education means...
Education is very important and is a very good thing for you to have if you want to get a better job, yes. And even if I do 100% concede, even if quality of education were to be exactly the same in between black and white Americans still have a harder time getting jobs because just by virtue of them having a black sounding name, they're more likely to be rejected from a job application.
Or what is it just because they're choosing the wrong things to take in school?
Okay, so for you to
Hmm?
say this, I would need the following citations for you. Number one, I would need you to show me a
Yeah, just
citation
one
of.
one variable. One variable.
Yeah, I know, but you can think
I
of
can't
any
show
number
you a
of variables. But
citation, but I'm just
I'm
saying.
gonna need the citation on number one, that they're en masse picking a specific discipline within academia that causes them to have a less access to job. I will need you to show me or to prove to me that the reason why they're picking this other job is because of something inherent to black people rather than environmental influences and, like you said, motivation, which might have caused them to pick that as an academic path. And there's no way you can prove or show me both of those things.
Well, you never know. They can do a study, you know?
Oh, okay. So you're just conceding that you don't have any academic backing to this. It's just something you made up in your head.
Yeah, just a thought that I had in my
Okay,
head
just a thought that you
that
had
they
in your
should take into
wonderful.
consideration.
That'll fly really
Let
well
me
when it comes to
ask you,
drafting
let me
policy.
ask you, let me ask you a question right now. Do you think do you think the 94 crime bill was racist? And if you do, explain to me why.
Why are we talking about this? I don't care about the 94 crime bill specifically to this. This is not relevant to this discussion that we're having right now.
I do care about the 94 crime bill because how's it not?
How is it not? Because we're right now talking about education and buying
Yeah,
homes, but then you keep jumping to some other thing. Why are we talking about the
okay.
94 crime? I'm super confused right now. So I told you that your chance, and even if, oh my god, I didn't even have to talk about the basket weaving memes. Okay, there are studies that illustrate that just because you have a black sounding name, you're less likely to be accepted for a job. And they control for qualifications, labor market conditions, and all other relevant variables. These applications were made for this experiment. These are not real people. These are hypothetical, where the only thing they changed, the only changing variable, apart from, I don't know, like the mood of the people who were like looking at the applications, I guess, was the name and the racial connotation their name had. So when you tell me why didn't just black Americans just like work and just buy homes, well, I'm now pointing to one of the very, very, very many systemic and institutional barriers that makes it harder for them to accumulate the amount of wealth necessary to buy a home, for example.
And what is that?
One
Job
of them is the fact that
discrimination.
just by virtue of having a name, which is more common among black Americans, they are less likely to be looked at or considered as potential employees within firms.
But hold on, how is that systemic when these businesses are private?
What does systemic mean to you? Hello? Are you there?
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, but
So are you saying that
how is
you're
that
okay?
systemic
Even if I
racism
don't call it
when it's
systemic, even if I just call it racism, how is that not racism within employment? When literally
but
the
how
racial connotation of your name makes it harder for you to get employed.
but why are we just assuming that it's just racial?
What else is it? Because there's no other difference in the applications except for the racial connotations of the names. There's no other. They sent out
But
identical
are they
resumes.
taking
The
any
only
other
thing they changed
variables
is
into consideration?
there are no other variables. They manufactured these resumes for the purpose of this experiment. And the only thing they changed in the resumes was the name of the applicant. There are no other variables to consider because this was made for the experiment.
No. I mean, are they sure? I'm gonna have to look into that stuff myself. And also I have another question.
No, no, no. I no. I want you to.
Jewish
I want you.
people
What else is there? Please tell me. What could
Jewish
possibly be a
people
confounding variable?
Jewish
Hold on. Why you're pivoting?
Jewish
What could possibly be a confounding variable there? Name one.
what did they go to school for? What did they study? The
Yeah, the
marks,
resumes
how
are identical. you have two resumes, two blank resumes. In both of them, they fill in Harvard graduate. I've worked at McDonald's and Tesco and Walmart while I did my Harvard thingy. Now I have been looking for jobs for a year and a half. These things are written the exact same way on these two papers. These two papers are identical. The only thing they do differently is on one of them, they write Greg, and on one of them, they write Jamal. That's the only difference within these two resumes. There are no possible confounding variables there. There's only one variable, which is the names.
I'm going to have to look into that study myself.
Okay, this is a super popular study. I have no idea how you haven't heard of it. Have you heard of Ben Shapiro?
Yes, I have heard of Ben Shapiro.
Even Ben Shapiro like talks about this, like tries to like debunk this study fairly frequently. I don't know why.
Well, he said it was a class issue, though.
Yeah, that's incorrect, completely incorrect, because one of the actual like the authors predicted that conservatives would try to use that to dismiss the study, and they put in a specific sentence in the study that says, we also find little evidence that employers were inferring social class from their names. So no, it's not a class thing. It's literally just a racial thing. And this study has been like replicated like dozens of times, even in meta-analyses. Like this is one of the most like literal like bulletproof studies that exists on this issue.
No. But here's the thing. We got Jews.
Okay,
Italians,
so you okay? I want you to say that you concede this
here.
point on names. I want you to say that.
Nope. I'm gonna have to look into that myself.
Okay, but you clearly knew what study I was talking about, because you knew that the typical conservative talking point of saying social class. So you know about the study, you just don't have a response to it. But anyways, let's talk about the fucking Jewish question. Go for it.
Okay. First of all, we had in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, we had poor Jewish, Italians, and Irish coming to America. How was it that they were able to succeed and not black people?
Yeah, I asked you why. I don't know. I need you to tell me.
Because it's their culture.
And where does their culture come from?
Black within. But hey,
from within. Okay, so now we're back to the whole like ethereal divine within, you know, character culture thing. I like we're literally running in circles. This is like laughable. Do you have any final points that will not just loop us back again?
They came here. The Jews came here. They were poor, but they worked hard.
And why do they work hard and Black Americans don't work hard?
Because they had motivation.
And why do they have motivations and Black Americans don't have motivation?
Because they did not want to be poor.
Do you think Black Americans just like want to be poor?
I think many of them just don't care.
Okay. All right. We're going back. We're just looping over and over again. If you have like we're not getting anywhere on this. This is just incredibly funny. Do you have any closing statements or whatever? Preferably if you are a troll, I would like you to mention it here, because that would make me feel a lot better in my faith in humanity right now.
All I just gotta say is Black people need to pull themselves. They need to pull themselves up by the bootstraps and get to work. Like Candace. That's all.
That's never heard before argument, but I'm gonna let you go away with that. Well, I appreciate you for coming to and talking about this. Goodbye. Oh my fucking god. I hope that's a troll. I really do. I really hope that's a troll.